Now that our carburetor is securely installed onto our intake, it's time to hook up the throttle linkage from the car to the carburetor. This is a good time to get a friend to come over and help you. The way you need to start this out is to get the pedal depressed firmly against the positive throttle stop. This positive throttle or pedal stop is mandatory. What it does is it prevents over travel of the throttle pedal, which can lead to damage at the carburetor. Now, not all floorboards are sufficient positive throttle stops. On a fabricated floor such as this one, the pressure of the driver's foot can cause the floor to flex and lead to the over travel I was just speaking of. So it's very important to have one of these in the car. The damage I was talking about back here can be very serious. And what it leads to is this end plate getting bent and quite possibly hanging the throttle at wide open. And that's not something that anybody wants to have happen. Now we're ready to attach it to the carburetor. With the pedal up against the positive stop, we want to open up the carburetor to wide open throttle. We need to adjust our rod here to make sure that it slips in, that looks pretty good, without any interference with the carburetor end plate. Like I say, we got a pretty good slip fit there. Now we'll go ahead, let the throttle close all the way. Go ahead and we'll start our nut. And tighten it up. Okay, now that we've got it good and tight, we want to make sure that it goes from this closed butterfly position to wide open throttle, and then back again. And the next step would be to attach the throttle return springs and then perform the same test again. Keep in mind, you should never rely on your base plate to act as your positive throttle stop, nor should you rely on the springs that are located on the throttle shafts to act as your return springs. You always need the secondary set. Now that we have our linkage all hooked up and our carburetor is securely mounted to our intake, we're ready to hook up the fuel system. And as always, we have to make sure we do a good job to prevent any leaks, which can certainly lead to fires. If you're installing Demon inlet fittings, use only the sealing washer that is included with the kit. If you're using fittings somewhere in the system that have a pipe thread and you're going to use a thread sealant, you need to make sure to keep the flow path clear of either tape or compound. All Demon carburetors feature 9/16 24 inlets. And if you have a road Demon, you need to make sure you use one of the official 3 kits that are available to bring fuel into that carburetor. One final thing that must be done is to flush any and all lines that were used in the system to make sure they are free of debris so they don't get into the carburetor and plug some of the circuitry or jam in the needle and seat. Keep in mind that after it's all installed, we need to make sure that we check this system for leaks at pressure. To ease in starting, it's a good idea to prime the carburetor first. If you're in a car that has a mechanical fuel system, what you want to do is unhook the ignition, possibly the coil wire, and spin the motor over until the bowls are full of fuel. On a car like this that has an electric system, you want to bump the pump on and off to fill the fuel bowls. An abrupt surge of fuel through the needle and seat can damage the float, and it can lead to flooding, which can of course lead to a fire. So we'll come over here. That should fill our fuel bowls quite nicely. Then before we go ahead and turn the key, we're going to wet the intake. Best way to do that is to come over and press down on the accelerator pump arms a couple times. That'll get some fuel in the intake. It'll make this car start off really easy. When you start the engine for the first time, it's a good idea to have a friend come over. A second set of eyes can be invaluable in spotting fuel leaks or other problems that you might have, even if you can start the engine from the engine compartment. Another good tip is to make sure there is plenty of initial timing in the engine. 10 to 14 degrees takes care of most situations. However, if you've used a larger camshaft, 18 to 20 degrees may be more applicable. Keep in mind, initial timing has an effect on overall timing, and we don't want the motor to detonate, so it may be necessary to get the distributor recurved. We recommend the use of MSD timing components. They offer timing tapes for the balancer and a good timing light that'll make the job simple. If you have any questions regarding the timing of your motor, give the guys at MSD a call and they'll get you what you need to get the job done. We want to set the engine to a fast idle, about 2,000 RPM, during the warm-up phase. If you use your idle speed screw to achieve this RPM, keep in mind how many turns you've put in so you can return it to its initial position. We want to make sure that the engine is warmed up before we do any tuning on the carburetor. We're going to go ahead and start the motor now. On initial startup, it's always a good idea to have someone sitting behind the wheel of the car. It's just a matter of safety, and it's something we strongly recommend. Okay, let's go ahead and start the engine now. If the engine didn't start and idle with the new Demon carburetor, and assuming that we have fuel at the carburetor and spark at the cylinder, there's a few settings that we need to check. We want to take a good look at the idle mixture screw adjustment and the closed butterfly position. Please make note of these settings for later. The first adjustment that we need to check is that of the closed butterfly position. Best way to look at this is to turn the carburetor upside down. If we open the throttle to wide open, you'll notice 4 slots, one in each of the bores, that extend from the main body down into the base plate. These slots are the transfer slots, and they supply the fuel necessary to help the carburetor go from a closed idle position to part throttle. Gasoline carburetors usually need to have about 20 thousandths, or what appears to be a small square, of the transfer slot visible below the bottom edge of the butterfly. Alcohol carburetors need a little different adjustment. They need the bottom of the butterfly to be basically even with the bottom of the transfer slot. It is important to try to keep both the primary and the secondary closed butterfly adjustments pretty much the same. In other words, you don't want a lot of transfer slots showing in the primary and next to none in the secondary. This is sure to lead to a stumble. If you do need to make some changes to the closed butterfly setting, it is done by using the idle speed screw located in the base plate. Turning the screw clockwise will cause the butterflies to open, and counterclockwise will close the butterflies up some. This is the same for both the primary and the secondary throttle shafts. The idle mixture screws are located on either side of the metering block. These screws help to control the amount of fuel that the carburetor supplies to the engine in the closed butterfly and just off closed butterfly positions. To check the initial setting, simply turn the screw in half-turn increments until it bottoms out against the metering block. Return the screw to the delivered setting. Most carburetors require an adjustment of approximately 1.5 turns out from the bottomed out position. All 4 screws should be adjusted the same. Keep in mind, this is just a preliminary adjustment and will need some fine-tuning after the engine has reached operating temperature.